Welcome to the Trumpet of the last few days. I'm Stanley Farrar.
And I'm Robert Farrar.
And I'm Joshua Farrar.
Here in the frozen South. The rolling blackouts have been running through state after state, and AOC came out and blamed it on the fact that, well, they didn't embrace the Green New Deal and are using windmills and solar power instead of gas and coal generators.
That's the exact problem, is that they were using windmills and solar power rather than gas and coal.
Yeah.
Gas and coal have an incredible history for being able to handle cold temperatures and the demand in cold temperatures.
There's the key. The demand suddenly spikes, and windmills and solar panels cannot spike. They don't give you extra power on demand.
You can't throw in another shovel of coal and keep it running.
Turn up the steam.
So they overdraw and the entire thing blacks out.
Yep. Now a hydroelectric dam, you can open up the valves and let more water through, speed up the generator, you get more power out of it. With a nuclear power plant, you can get more steam. With a same true coal and gas, but you're stuck when it comes to windmills and solar panels.
There is one way to get solar panels to be more efficient. Just sort of erase the ozone layer right above your state.
Just get rid of it.
Let more radiation in through.
It's supposed to repair the ozone layer.
So it's literally working itself out of a job.
The thing about it is that these environmentalists just praise solar and windmills so much. And you know what solar and windmills are notorious for doing?
Apart from killing birds?
Killing birds, that's right. The birds fly into the blades of the spinning windmills and get killed. And they fly over the solar panel farms and get cooked.
And it is a pain to clean them off solar panels.
Real environmentally friendly things. Not to mention the making of them is highly toxic.
And they take up so much space. And
basically, AOC and the squad and Greta Thunberg are promoting the destruction of the planet.
Proper pronunciation.
Thunberg?
Yes, Greta Thunberg.
Okay, whatever her name is. They're out to take and destroy the planet to save the planet. But India is real fond of her. Right.
Oh, India just loves Greta. So much so they even burned her in effigy. That's what happens when you support a socialist revolt and the rest of the society isn't pro-socialist. Because what's currently going on in India, and it's kind of been hush-hush, it's just been on the background, is the Indian lawmaking body. I don't know if they call it a parliament or a Congress, or I don't know what term they use.
I don't know enough about their government to know.
It passed a few laws actually dropping restrictions for farmers. And the farmers' unions went ballistic. Because what it essentially did was it also got, well, they have sort of an unspoken agreement that the government subsidizes all of their crops. And with these new laws,
It lowers their restrictions, but it doesn't subsidize their crops, so they start producing more, or potentially producing more, and they crash the market.
Well, I don't know that it would crash the market, because the whole idea is that it expands the market. Because I've read the specific laws, and the whole idea behind them is to get the products further afield.
The United States Great Depression proved that it crashes the market.
Not if you have more people who are able to buy it.
That's just it, though. You don't always have more people who are willing to buy it. Willing and able are not the same thing.
But these laws are specifically designed to find new markets for them.
They should find the new markets first and then increase production afterward, not increase production in the hope that they'll find a new market.
It doesn't change the production. These laws are specifically designed to drop barriers for them exporting their goods.
But at the same time, they're no longer subsidizing them.
Yes.
Which is effectively
a good thing.
Well, not necessarily. Don't look at things in a vacuum.
Yes.
It could be a good thing if they were able to actually sell their crops, which won't necessarily happen.
Well, then if the market needs to crash, that's a good thing. Because it'll teach them not to overproduce.
Which is fine. I've got no issue with that.
Now, technically speaking, overproduction lowers the cost of goods, but it also takes and can increase the income coming in through larger sales of the cheaper goods.
But what they were doing is they were taking a risk. They were opening up. Well, they were attempting to open up new markets across India, making it easier for the farmers, particularly in the Punjab, to sell their goods.
Well, that's why everyone has a problem with it, is the fact that it is taking a risk, rather than verifying the market is there before they do it.
But the thing is, one, me being a non-government interventionist, I see that as a good thing, because the government doesn't need to be paying for people not to farm anyway.
Oh, I think in the long term it's better off for them, but in the short term it will cause a lot of harm.
And for those who say they're not paying for them not to farm, they in fact are, because by subsidizing the crops, they are incentivizing.
They're literally paying them not to farm. It happens in the United States as well.
Yeah.
In fact, there's a common argument I hear in the United States where they say, yeah, California will be just fine. They produce food. They produce 80 to 90% of the food that is consumed by the United States. And they neglect a couple different factors. One, if you use all the major cities, then just providing food to their own major cities and maybe New York, they fill that quota. And two, the Midwest is literally paid not to farm, because if they overproduce, they will crash the markets. And the price of food will plummet.
Well, when it comes to the Midwest and their price controls, that was one of the mistakes that Roosevelt made, was by paying farmers not to farm.
Yeah.
They should have let the prices go down. Output. We've had years where farmers have lost their shirts because they couldn't make enough, couldn't sell enough of a product because they couldn't grow enough.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you are determining how much you sell, how much you grow is one thing, but how much you choose to sell of what you grow is still up to you. And by having the larger amount of tilled land and growing more crops on a bad year, you can make up for that bad year because you have more crop to sell.
Now, the reason why they
But if
did
you
it,
don't have that crop to sell, you just lose your shirt.
the reason why they did it, regardless of upsides and bad sides, for a short history lesson, was they found that one, they were overproducing crops because money wasn't worth anything, and they had created a sort of negative feedback loop where money wasn't worth anything because of the Great Depression, so they weren't making enough money to survive. So they started growing more crops in order to make more money, causing the prices to go down, causing them to try to farm more, which ended up causing overtilled lands and due to certain negative practices such as not farming in alternating rows, inadvertently caused the Dust Bowl. That is a massive oversimplification, but it is the reason why they did what they did, regardless of whether it was the correct decision or not.
And I've gotten an earful plenty of times from a farmer friend of mine how bad the Roosevelt era regulations are.
Yeah. And I will not defend it, but for everyone
And the thing about
listening,
it is,
that is the history behind it.
even if you were going to do something like that on a temporary basis to stave off a disaster in the short term, they should have the regulations should have been done away with immediately after the problem was solved.
Yes.
But
Agreed.
anyway, I never managed to get to my point. So, the price subsidies were never in law. They were just kind of an unspoken rule. And it was understood, at least by the farmers' unions, that they were going to get rid of it because they wanted them to produce, the government wanted them to produce more so that they could ship it abroad. So they went ballistic and started claiming that it was going to help the corporate farms outcompete the small, independent farm. Now, this, believe it or not, is a talking point that is used a lot in the US when it comes to farming. And the whole corporate farms taking over is an utter myth. Because family farms are a lot more successful than they think. In fact, family farms.
They also overestimate the efficiency of bureaucracy.
Yes, they do.
Bureaucracy is far too rigid to ever efficiently run a farm.
The vast majority of farms in the U.S. are still independent family farms, farming hundreds of acres because they've been doing it for a long time. They know what they're doing. Versus corporatizing everything, which has a similar effect to the government corporatizing farms, with the exception of they actually have a stake in it.
Sometimes literally, if they're
Well,
producing
I knew
cattle.
a farmer in Nebraska. I knew a farmer in Nebraska. He took and farmed 10 sections. There's 680 acres in a section. That's thousands of acres. Simple family farm. There are counties that aren't as big as his farm.
But believe it or not, the price subsidies actually help the corporate farms. Because corporate farms are still very good at keeping their prices low. So by subsidizing it, they're making extra money from the government than those independent family farms who who have been proven able to compete against the corporate farms without the corporate backing.
Interesting thing is that the corporate farms primarily produce produce for only their own usage. Like, for example, Brahms,
Yeah.
which is a chain of restaurants slash grocery stores slash farms primarily in the South, where they run their own dairy farms, they make their own produce, and they supply their own stores and ice cream stores.
Oklahoma, Arkansas, Missouri,
That is the closest thing to a
maybe
self-sustaining
Kansas.
corporate farm I have ever seen. And they only produce enough for their own entity.
Well, there are numerous corporate ranches.
Yeah.
Some of the biggest ranches in the world are corporate. But the biggest ranch in Texas is privately owned. The
At
King
least we don't
Ranch
have to worry about
stretches from
the Neverland Ranch anymore.
That's true. No, it still exists.
Oh, I'm sure it still exists. We just don't have to worry about it as much anymore.
But the King Ranch stretches almost 250 miles. That is a big private ranch.
So anyway, yeah, the farmers' unions have threatened to try to topple the Indian government. It's reached that stage. And Greta Thunberg tweeted on Twitter a toolkit on talking points they should use. And the Indian people were not happy. Not happy at all. Why is this foreigner getting involved in our affairs? Though I'm not surprised, because they are socialists. And for anyone who doubts me, name one union that isn't socialist. Also, why are there farmers' unions? The whole point of unions was to protect the worker from the employer, and most independent farmers are self-employed. So they'd be protecting themselves from themselves.
Ranch hands.
Yeah, that's about it.
Well,
you couldn't. It would have to be the ranch hands, in which case they can't represent the farmers as a whole, because they're not representing the farm owners.
most farmer unions represent corporate farms and ranches.
It's almost like you
The
should
irony
be
of that.
Yeah. Because the family farms don't have to worry about it. You gotta protect yourself from the rest of the family.
Gotta
Well,
protect the family.
actually, that might not be a bad idea in some families.
Sounds very mafia to me.
But that's just a counterintuitive to the whole thought process.
Well, the very notion that an 18-year-old girl thinks she knows more about everything.
Is she 18 now? Man, time flies.
Actually, 18.
Yeah. That she can take and stick her nose into the politics of India.
It's the autism talking.
And she don't even know what's going on. Well, that might be. Asperger's are not known for their subtlety.
I don't think it's mild enough to be classified as Asperger's in her case.
Well, that's what she's been diagnosed as.
Everyone I have ever met with Asperger's is at least intelligent. Granted, that is entirely circumstantial evidence based on the fact that I have never met one that isn't. So I think it's pretty safe to qualify her as not having Asperger's.
Oh, I'll go through and say it this way. I don't believe that Asperger's or autism is her problem. I think she's suffering from too big of a case of affluenza.
Ah, that would do it.
That disconnect from reality.
She's fame hungry. Had a
disconnect from
taste
reality,
and wants too much more of it.
Well, she grew up in a rich family.
Yeah. With her every whim being
let's
served
face
to.
it. She keeps getting invited to take and speak at the UN. So how does she get to the UN? Does she fly? No. She goes on a private yacht.
How dare you?
So she takes and goes through this with a private yacht, fully professionally crewed, and claims, well, I'm doing this to save the environment. This is one of the options that anybody can use.
Yeah, it's one of the options that anybody can use as long as they're willing to spend thousands in fuel for every trip. Yeah, sure.
And then she goes through and does it and says that I'm doing this because this is the green way to do it, and not taking into consideration that the crew takes and sails the yacht over, then flies back. Then they fly a new crew over to ship her back when she's through.
And for a lot of people who don't know how most ships run, most ships burn diesel.
This one was specifically geared to be environmentally friendly.
Oh, so they basically just strip mined an entire country
This
for
particular
enough zinc to power her batteries. Okay, that's environmentally friendly, sure.
I'm sorry, they just used an open mind.
I believe, if I remember right, her yacht's a trimaran that sails and is solar.
Okay, so I was right on the mining an entire country for zinc.
But we're talking a ship that, and it is a ship. It's not a boat.
Yeah. Now, most cruise ships.
18-year-old?
Sorry, go ahead.
How many 18-year-olds do you know that have access to a yacht?
She wasn't even 18 at that time.
Well, she's using it again this year.
Well, I don't know many who do that. But, on the other hand, I do know quite a bit about boats. And I will say that in regards to cruise ships, almost every stop, they load off their old crew and load up an entirely new crew to staff it for the next stop. And those places have the advantage of not needing to fly their crews out because the way they rotate it. That's not how she's doing things, which means that she is spending millions in aircraft fuel to fly everyone everywhere and doing far more damage to the environment than she says she's saving.
Well, it's kind of like the Chinese claiming that they're saving the environment. Biggest polluters in the world.
You know, them in North Korea actually a few months ago had this weird tribunal thing where they held in the UN. They held Australia in court for doing damage to the environment. It kind of went under the radar, but the gall of that.
Well, I mean, if what they say is true, and burning fossil fuels causes climate change, as they say, then yes, Australia would be in contempt because they're the ones who provide coal to China.
The reason why China's been freezing lately is because they haven't been letting the Australian coal in. Because they dare criticize them.
Yeah, Australia and China have been having a trade war for a while that was swept under the rug because of the U.S. trade war with China.
No, that's all over because of
If you combine
our new president being in China's pocket. And now we have to overlook things like ethnic cleansing because, according to our dear leader, it's part of their culture. And we can't possibly offend their culture. It's like...
Yeah, as far as he's concerned, and trying to kill off entire groups of people is okay if it's your culture.
That would be like saying that every generation we have to let a horde of Mongols sweep through the entirety of Europe, massacring and raping everyone in their way because it's part of their culture. It's their heritage. And we can't fight back.
See, culture does not preclude morality. And they conflate culture and morality.
But he doesn't have any morals. Yes, but he has no morals.
Of course he does. It's a leather bifold in his back pocket.
What are you talking about? It's all electronic these days, Josh. Give it the time.
But the thing about it is now Eastern Europe is starting to turn on China.
Well,
Because
Eastern
of the
Europe
fake
is likely to do it
vaccines.
first.
China, every time they send out vaccines, when it comes to the importing country, most the importing countries take it and examine the vaccines to verify they are what they claim they are before they distribute them to the populace. And what they have found is a huge percentage of the vaccines coming out of China are mineral water.
That's no surprise.
AstraZeneca.
You're right, they should have gone AstraZeneca. Or one of any number of other companies.
On a side note, and this is a bit of a tangent that I may or may not clip out. Where I work, before a long voyage, it's required, especially to overseas, it is required to get a penicillin shot. And I found out recently that these expire, apparently. A guy that I was talking to the other day mentioned that when his crew was getting the shots, a whole load of people, himself included, started coming in with negative side effects, like their entire arm locking up, lockjaw style, but they couldn't move their arm. And this is not a normal side effect for penicillin. They checked the packaging and found out that all the shots they had were 5 years out of date, out of expiration.
Wow. Now, we used to buy penicillin down in Mexico,
Hmm.
and and it comes in a powder, and once you mix it, you have to keep it in the refrigerator or it goes bad,
It's like yeast.
like yeast. Yes,
Oh, they are both
and
mold, so it's not all that surprising.
if you take and when you take and you look at the vials of penicillin, which you can buy at the farmers markets, um, the ranch supply stores,
They're pre-mixed, aren't they?
there's they have to be kept. They're kept in refrigerator. If you don't have refrigeration, you cannot maintain penicillin.
Even then,
So
it'll
even if
eventually
it's
degrade.
within date and it hadn't expired, it degrades and goes bad. With all the power outages and problems that we find going around this country and around China and every other country that's had natural disasters lately, I bet there's a lot of bad penicillin out there.
Probably a whole lot of bad penicillin. Though in Texas, they can just throw it in the snow.
Yeah, that's true. They can here too. At least for the next day or two.
Yeah.
I've heard that Texas is supposed to be warming up into the 60s by the end of the week. This week, not next.
Hmm.
There's only one other day this week.
Yeah, but
Well, I heard it was supposed to be today that they were supposed to get 60s.
if our upload schedule is as consistent as it has been, this will probably go up on Sunday. So
So it will have already hit 60 by the time it goes up. Uh, uh, um, well, according to our relatives in southern Oklahoma, it's supposed to hit 60.
things got cold over here too, but it was I think it was primarily due to the volcanic eruption.
The volcanic corruption.
No, the volcanic eruption.
Yeah, volcanic corruption.
It erupted like a week ago, and there's a lot of ash in the air right now. I mean, there's a lot of ash in there anyway, but there's more than usual due to Etna.
So now you have a different reason to wear a mask.
Yeah.
Yeah, you need a respirator for that.
I'm far enough away from the mountain that it shouldn't be an issue. But it has been a lot colder after it went up, which is annoying.
Well, you don't have the long winter.
Barely have a winter at all. At best, it can be called a rainy season. Getting close to the fire season here soon. Everything burns in the summer.
So are we out of topics?
I'm out of topics.
Well, that's no.
Oh wait, we
All
haven't
right.
gone over the Limbaugh, Rush Limbaugh.
Yeah, Rush Limbaugh passed away this week. And in doing so, well, I personally never met the man, but I have been listening to him on and off since 1988. The probably one of the best communicators of the conservative perspective in politics passed when he died. Because none of the other talking heads seem to be as good at getting the point across. Probably because they don't have the humor and the ability to point out the absurdity of the Democrat and liberal positions.
The ones that do go out of their way to insult the liberal and Democrat position, so it doesn't exactly earn them any favor.
Mm-hmm.
Namely, Crowder is a big example there. He does a very good job of pointing out their absurdity, but he is also, I would say, intentionally offensive to them, which does not buy you people into your point of view. Then again, I don't really think he cares.
Rush at times was pretty offensive.
There's a difference between being offensive and being deliberately offensive. If you're offensive just because...
It's like when they were talking about...
It's like the difference between... No, that's a bad analogy. I'm not going to state it. But if you're offensive by just pointing out reality, there's nothing you can do about that. But being offensive because you intend to hurt them, they can tell. Everyone can tell when you are intentionally insulting them. And regardless of how absurd their position is, it will make them double down.
Yeah, and thing about it is that's one thing that they say that Limbaugh was very good about, is as a whole, he was a very personable person, even if he didn't agree with you.
Mm-hmm.
Now, he did take and make comments that he knew would wind him up, like when AOC started pushing the Green New Deal. He made a comment about how he used the EIB-1 plane to fly himself to the golf course, and how on one of his trips on the EIB-1 he realized partway there that he had left behind his favorite driver.
So of course he has to fly back.
So he got on the phone. No, he got on the phone and contacted the people in Florida and told them about what he left behind, and told them to send it out to him on EIB-2. I have no clue whether he even had an airplane, let alone two of them. But he's rich, but he's not necessarily that rich.
Well, he's not anything anymore.
That's true. But he was rich, but he wasn't that rich.
Yeah.
He was worth millions. He wasn't worth billions. It wasn't like Trump.
Now, I would probably have a lot less animosity toward the leftist politicians who cry about this whole environmentally friendly stuff if they actually put their money where their mouth was and clearly acted like they believed what they said. If they started selling their oceanfront property, if they stopped flying everywhere, if they stopped taking private cruises, if they actually bought environmentally friendly stuff and actually showed that they believed, even if wrongly, if they believed what they said they did, then I would probably be more open to their position. But they are so obviously
I'd have a lot more respect for them.
Hypocrites.
Well, Al Gore. He was one of the big environmentalists back when y'all were kids.
Mm-hmm.
Ran for president. And it came out after his movie An Inconvenient Truth that they looked at his electric consumption on his mansion and discovered he used more electricity than a small town. He also flew everywhere on private jets. He's a hypocrite.
Yeah.
Now, I remember when I was a kid, and they were talking the global cooling and how we were going to be in the next great ice age, and it was going, and that we had to take and embrace all these socialist principles to keep the world from freezing and to lower the greenhouse gases so that the world wouldn't freeze. And they said the world would be frozen solid and be destroyed in 10 years.
I'm sure they didn't call them greenhouse gases back then.
No, they called them CFCs.
Yeah.
Which they later just applied as greenhouse gases. Well, actually, no, they weren't greenhouse gases. They're considered gases that destroy the ozone layer. But
Then they took and came out and they said a few by the late 70s, early 80s, they suddenly started this kick of global warming. So they went from global cooling, everything's going to freeze, to global warming. And you know, the cause and effect was supposed to be the same thing.
It's almost like they didn't have any
And
decent talking points.
And the solution is still socialism and communism. Then they took and it came out that they rigged the graphs and faked them.
Surprise!
The
surprise.
hockey stick effect that became so big in the 90s was fake. And they were saying even then that we had 12 years and before we hit at the point of no return.
Yeah, that was what, 20 years ago?
Yeah. In the 80s, they were talking about we were going to burn up. They've got songs out about the world going to burn up because of global warming. And this is right after the global cooling nonsense. And
they had to be loud in order to cover up their previous narrative.
They say, well, yeah. Then they took and turned around and said, well, there's holes in the ozone layer, so we have to do away with Freon and all these other things to take and prevent to rebuild the ozone layer. Well, you know what? There's always been holes in the ozone layer. They're at the North and South Poles.
Not to mention,
it's because
it's very interesting that these timings happen to line up when the patent for those chemicals ran out. Just saying.
Yeah, that
very
that it just happened to be when
very inconvenient truth.
And then they took and it was pointed out that the world wasn't warming anymore, and so they changed it from global warming to climate change. Now Greta still thinks it's global warming, but climate change can swing any way. And nobody can deny that there's climate change. The climate's been changing up and down in a cyclical fashion for as long as there's recorded history. We know the climate is always changing.
Yeah.
After all, at one point in time,
the world was covered
Sahara
in
Desert
water.
was a swamp. That's right.
The Sahara
We
Desert
know
was a
that there used
swamp.
to be
Antarctica used to
tropical
be
plants.
a tropical jungle.
Yeah. And if Antarctica used to be a tropical jungle, then how is global warming such a bad thing?
It's just back to old form.
It's because of the rising tides. It's gonna kill all the polar bears.
They're great swimmers.
Well, rising tides raises all boats. It's fine.
Now that that's right.
Watch as a continent unloose.
And they talk about, well, they say, but there's islands that are, the rising ocean waters are going to take and sink these islands. Actually, there's a little a show that was on TV back in the 70s.
I know where you're going with this one. Mr. Wizard.
Where it called Mr. Wizard. And he proved that you could that if you took ice into a glass of water, marked its level, that when the ice melts, it doesn't rise any.
In fact, I think he went beyond that,
So
and he used like
melting,
an eyedropper and filled it to the point where it was actually bubbling over. And the melting of the ice actually caused the water level to drop slightly.
yeah, because it loses expansion.
Mm-hmm.
So it's one of those things that if you melted the ice, it's not going to flood the earth. And now the islands that are sinking, I'm not denying there are islands sinking. But that's not from the ocean levels getting deeper. It's because the island is sinking. Because islands rise up through volcanic action and through through the movement of the Earth's plates. Some of them sink and go underwater. That's been happening forever. Not forever, but for as long as the Earth's been around. Why
And if it
should we
becomes
take and
too big of a
suddenly
deal, you can be sure that Apple will come out with their new product, iLand.
China's already
And
done it.
sell it as
Look
if
at the
it's a new
South
idea.
China Sea.
Yeah, but Apple will sell it like it's a new idea because that's what Apple does.
Because the South China Sea, China's been building islands in the South China Sea to expand the area they can claim as their own. Well, if they can build an island, okay, move the people from these sinking islands to one you built. Okay, it's taken care of. Or haul in sand and build the island up.
Now, there's an interesting thing. At about 4 or 5 years ago, I went to Rome for the first time. And I went on the standard typical tours. They took us around. I saw the Colosseum. I saw where the Hippodrome used to be. And also their large temple that was supposed to be for all of the gods. The Pantheon. There's an interesting thing that is noted. The city is layered. You have the new things built on top of the old things. And some of the old things are actually to the point where they are closer to about 7 or 8 feet below the standard street level. And they have to excavate down to them. It is very common for this to happen. It's just the nature of geology, actually.
In the Sierra Desert, they had found a group of ruins in the desert that was mostly covered with sand. And archaeologists started digging there. And what they found is every time they reached what they thought was the bottom, there was another town underneath it.
Well,
And I forget how many levels down they went. They went a long ways.
it's well established in archaeology that people build in layers. They'll build a city, it'll get destroyed, or they'll demolish something and build on top of it, and then
But
that'll get demolished.
that was just the interesting thing about Rome, is the fact that, yes, they did that to a certain degree, but there are buildings that they never let get demolished. They just have to keep digging things out, and as they kept sweeping it up, despite the fact that the street level never actually changing because they kept building on top of it, the old things just sank. And they kept having to excavate it out every time.
It sounds to me like they need to demolish it, level it, and try again.
That would be very interesting. I was actually most disappointed at the fact that the young Italians had no respect for their own history, other than it being a tourist trap, and they would graffiti absolutely everything of historical value. It was depressing. But that was just
But
my
believe it
take
or
on
not, people are getting to be that way here in the United States.
it. Yeah.
The younger generation in the United States has never been taught history, so they see no value in anything older than themselves.
Yeah.
You have to know that something happened before you were born for you to value it.
And you have to come to this innate realization that the world doesn't care about you. You mean nothing in the grand scheme of things, as far as the world is concerned.
And see, that wouldn't fit the ego of the modernists.
I'm sorry, you used the wrong term. You mean the postmodernist.
See,
Okay, the postmodernists.
as far as life is concerned, an individual's life is not even like throwing a rock in the sea. It's like throwing a single grain of sand. Forget a ripple, you don't even make a blip.
Yeah. And that's true with all of us. We live very short lifespan. In many ways, I'm sure the people before the flood would weep over how short of a lifespan we live.
Yeah.
Because here they are living almost 1,000 years, and we never get out of infancy as far as they're concerned.
To be fair, Adam and Eve are cheating. They were born adults.
Not all of them,
I said
That was
Adam and Eve are cheating.
just Adam and Eve.
I didn't say anyone else. I just said Adam and Eve are cheating.
Yeah. But Methuselah lived 969 years.
Yeah.
I
Oldest on
grant you
record.
those were 300. Those were lunar years.
So
lunar years still catch up.
lunar years still catch up, but that means that if you were to roughly round, I would take off about 50 years and apply that as the solar year cycle that he lived. And that's not counting leap years and that sort of thing, which would take off more.
Well, no, that's the thing though. Is lunar years have their own leap years.
Yeah.
The leap year, what they do is they add a 13th month on a lunar calendar.
Yeah. Regardless, even with that, they're still shorter than the standard solar year. And that time would add up, and you would take off quite a bit of years.
They're all 30 days long.
Yeah.
No, 28 days long. But as we take and we look at our society now, everybody seems to think they know everything. The ego and arrogance is unreal. And they think that they are the center of the universe. Why are they so worried about COVID? Because if they catch it and die, then the world will be irreparably damaged.
Of
They don't
course,
care if you catch it and die.
yeah, they don't care at all if you catch it and die.
It's like Biden coming out and just this week and saying, "Well, there was no oh, inoculation against the COVID until a vaccine against the COVID until after I became president."
Which is a straight
And
lie.
then there's video evidence of him, which is straight lie because there's video evidence of him taking it before he became president.
Well, we all know that
rewriting history is like page 1 in the Socialist Handbook.
It is, because you have to destroy everything that comes before you.
And we're seeing this all over.
It's
We
a
see it
very
all over the United
ego-centered
States. We see it all
ideology,
over Great
actually.
Britain. Very arrogant, very greedy.
That's probably why it's getting so popular these days.
Interesting thing about the term egocentric. So we got ego and centric, centric meaning the center. Ego comes from the Greek ego, which means I.
Or American waffles.
But it's very I-centric. It's all about me.
Man.
Well, back in the 60s,
I think it would be hilarious.
Became an egocentric society.
I think it would be hilarious to find an egocentric ideology.
Let's smooth around waffles.
All about waffles.
Waffles and fried chicken. Waffles.
All right.
And
now that we're done waffling about, if you like this episode, feel free to hit the like button. If you disliked it, feel free to hit the dislike button. Otherwise, feel free to subscribe as well, whether you liked it or not. And please, share this with your friends. Until then, see you next time.